All right, guys, the right-wing war has exploded and continued to devolve, I guess you could say. So yesterday, Crystal's next to me, by the way. Yesterday, we talked about, on Crystal, Kyle, and Friends, Steven Crowder basically calling out Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire without bringing them up by name, saying, like, oh, there are conservative companies that have really exploitative contracts, and, basically, like, look at how exploitative this is. He showed some of the provisions, and he's like, well, I'm going to change this. I'm going to basically launch a competitor to Daily Wire, and I'm not going to have exploitative contracts. And so not only did Steven Crowder omit that it was a contract from the Daily Wire, but he also omitted the amount of money he was going to be paid in the contract, which was $50 million, a minimum of $50 million.
And didn't he call it, like, literal slavery or literal enslavement or something like that?
Yeah, what do you say, wage slavery? Or like you're enslaved to the contract? Something to that effect, right? And so Daily Wire CEO, who is not Ben Shapiro, by the way, it's somebody else, Jeremy Boring, I think his name is, he comes out, he does this literal line-by-line response through the entire contract, to be like, hey, this guy's not giving you the full picture. Here's what we were proposing. You might not like it, but this is business. And of course, Steven Crowder could have just counter-offered and said, here's what would be an okay contract. But instead, he virtue signaled about how, I'm gonna do the ethical business model. And I told you yesterday, well, I think Crowder kind of planned this all along. Like, he went to talk to them knowing he was never going to accept any contract or any deal, and he wanted to highlight what he views as exploitative provisions in the contract, to then be like, see how exploitative they are? Because he wants to try to launch a competitor to the Daily Wire. So I got new videos here for you. Candace Owens comes out. She works for the Daily Wire. She responds to Steven Crowder, and she doesn't hold back. And then we have Ben Shapiro comes out, and he responds. And then we have another response from Crowder, who comes out and goes over the top even more. So buckle up for this. So first I want to just go through this tweet here with you. So these are the two videos of Steven Crowder. This was the original one he launched. 1.2 million views in 2 days.
Wow.
And this is at a time when the YouTube views are being like...
stop.
Yeah, it's time to stop. And then the response to the responses is, I didn't want to do this. I love how melodramatic these goofballs are.
I love everything about this, to be honest.
I was only offered $50 million. It's time to stop this.
It's an insult.
It's time to stop this. All right, so Ben Shapiro tweeted, Steven Crowder's latest video tragically proves that he knows nothing about 3 things. 1, business. 2, contract negotiation. 3, friendship and decency. Again, here's Jeremy going through our full initial non-binding offer to Steven line by line. So the main contention, the main sticking point from Steven Crowder is that he says, conservative media is beholden to big tech like YouTube and Facebook and all of them, because there are provisions in the contract that say, for example, if you lose 50% of your revenue on YouTube, so if you get a strike or they crack down on you, if you lose 50% of your revenue on YouTube, your fee will be docked 25%. So he views that as you're sending the message, hey, liberals and lefties, boycotts work, so just boycott me, make there be some official reaction from YouTube, and then I also get punished, even though I'm working with a quote-unquote conservative company.
Yeah.
That's his argument.
And it seems like he also is saying, basically, just even building your business on YouTube monetization is suspect.
Right, yeah. Now, on the one hand, there is a point there. If you're saying I'm trying to build a separate infrastructure that's not connected to these things at all, then it's a reasonable point to make. But I think he's also kind of misleading people with that argument, for the simple fact that, again, one of the provisions of the contract is if you lose half of your YouTube revenue, you lose 25% of your fee, which actually the numbers on that could work out in Crowder's favor, where it's obviously it would depend on the specific numbers. It would depend how much revenue he's bringing in and things of that nature, but it's very possible that under the provision of that contract, it is the Daily Wire assuming more risk.
Right.
There actually would be a cushion there, a padding there for Steven Crowder, where he gets some protection even if he gets destroyed and, blown off of YouTube or wherever.
Yeah, I'm convinced this was all basically a setup by Steven Crowder.
Yeah, he's trying to...
He wants to start his own thing.
Correct.
he wanted to come out with like some splash, and he's got to take some market share away from the Daily Wire, and so he sort of set this whole thing up. My view.
Let's keep it real. It's hard to claim a contract is exploitative when you're offered $50 million. Like, of course they're going to want the rights to your show for $50 million. In no world do they say, here's $50 million, and by the way, we don't own the distribution rights.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I also love, like, part of what I love about this fight is they're, like, posturing over care and concern over labor rights in contracts, something that none of these people has ever given a single shit about.
They don't care at all about this. We talked about the other day. Nobody came out and said, hey, I'm in favor of the FTC banning the non-compete clauses because they're exploitative. It's like, that's an actual exploitative provision in a contract that should be banned, and they didn't say anything about it. In fact, they would support...
matters for many more people than, like, millionaire conservative commentators.
Yeah. Okay, so more here. Matt Walsh, who works for the Daily Wire, came out and said, negotiations ended amicably. This was Stephen Crowder. Then he called weeks after the fact and secretly recorded the conversation so that he could pull this stunt. It's one of the lowest things I've ever seen in the business, a total betrayal of his friends and people who've supported and helped him. So Matt Walsh is referring to... Stephen Crowder recording a phone call with the CEO of the Daily Wire and then like playing that on his show to say, see how exploitative they are? We're going to get to that in a little bit. Then Jeremy Boring says, I would play the part of the call where we talked about our kids, Christmas, and him buying baby formula for his brother's children, but I wouldn't even know how to secretly record phone calls with my friends. And then, heartwarming, the worst people you know are all fighting. Very good tweet. No, nothing. Very good tweet. Okay, so now let's get to Candace Owens' response. So this is after just the first video of Stephen Crowder dropped. Candace comes out and says the following.
Nothing happened here other than nobody wanted to pay Stephen Crowder $120 million. So he turned to his viewers, who he thinks are stupid enough at least not to understand how business negotiations work, right? Like, this is like normal. You kick it back and forth. And they were going to make up for his loss. So people that are upset by his video, the millions of people who watched it, are now going to give him $1, whatever it costs to be in the mug club. And they're going to become the $120 million that he feels that he deserves.
Now, I think she slightly misses it. That's not the plan. The real plan is I'm going to launch a competitor to the Daily Wire. Mm-hmm. That's the plan.
Right.
It's not I'm going to raise just through small dollar donations from my audience to Mug Club.
Collecting all these, send me your email so we can...
Exactly.
Yeah,
right. And then he literally says, like, oh, if you're an up-and-coming, like, conservative commentator, reach out to me. You want to be an independent contractor? Well, you'll be an independent contractor. You want to be an employee? We'll work something out. You'll be an employee. So she misses it a little bit, but I'm not surprised because it's Candace Owens. I'm surprised she got even in the ballpark of what the reality is.
I was going to say this, unrelatable. People are trying to pay for bacon and eggs right now at the grocery store, trying to buy a steak once a week, and you're over here crying because somebody couldn't meet you at $120 million. And it is crying. I don't like it. It was a total...
So the claim they're making, and this is the first I heard this, Crystal, is that Stephen Crowder was mad because he counteroffered with $120 million, and they basically laughed him out of the room. That's what she's saying.
Right.
Now, granted, it's Candace Owens, so again, we don't know if it's accurate, right?
Right.
But
I mean, that kind of fits with what Matt Walsh was saying, too. Like, the negotiations ended amicably.
Amicably, right. Yeah. So, we can't meet you at $120 million. Like, well, bro, what are you, Michael Jordan in his prime? Like, what are you talking about? 120 million DZACs? Like, what are you talking about? That's more money than the top golfers in the world are getting to suck off the Saudi teat. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm still blown away by $50 million.
It's fucking ridiculous. Look at the amount of money on our side, guys. Is nowhere near this. It's ridiculous. First of all, there's not even big companies that offer big contracts, right? Everything's grassroots, bottom up. And sometimes people work with advertisers and make money that way, but we on principle don't even do that. So it's all you have is the small dollar donations. Yes. And he's whining over $50 million. Are you kidding me? Nobody in a million years would offer me $50 million.
Oh my God.
Hilarious.
Bitch move. There are plenty of things that happen across all organizations in the conservative movement where I will say that I empathize with Stephen Crowder and saying that sometimes you feel like a cynic, which is is everybody selling out? Are people doing this, people doing that? There are a lot of things that Daily Wire has done that I disagree with. There's a lot of things that Turning Point has done that I disagree with. There are things perhaps that PragerU has done that I disagree with. I have worked with all of these companies, right? But to do a total bitch move and go out to the public rather than trying to resolve these things and these slight differences behind the scenes, and to make it seem like you're the hero and you're the true one and you keep it authentic when nothing happened other than you didn't like an initial term sheet and all you had to do was tell them that and tell them what you didn't like and go back and forth with lawyers like everybody else. I think it's crappy. I think she's actually 100%
right on that point. I mean, it is. It was a setup from him. Mm-hmm. He's virtue signaling like I'm the most pure. Like that is what happened. There's no doubt about it. Even if you agree that certain provisions are like, that's kind of exploitative, that's not cool, you could have just counter-offered and said, drop those provisions, right? And saw what happened. He's a big name. They were going to work with him, you know?
Well, especially the thing that really persuaded me that it was a setup was actually Crowder's video when he plays the recording.
Of course, yeah. That's the giveaway.
Yeah, well, it's not just that he recorded the conversation, but just the way that he interacts on that conversation.
Right.
It seems really clear.
He's talking to an audience, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
he's this is so exploitative. How could you do this?
A guy who has never once in his life ever cared about exploitative contracts before, all of a sudden is like, oh, bro, I'm all about labor rights. Right. I, Steven Crowder, am all about labor rights.
This isn't about me. This is about the young creator who comes next.
No, it's about the young creator who you want to hoodwink into joining your network, who you're going to shake down in a different way.
Right.
I think Steven is a little egocentric. He probably will do better on his own. I don't think he knows how to play on a team. And by the way, the last thing I'm going to say, because I'm going on Tim Pool's tonight, so I'm going to say it anyways later, is that I'm pretty sure, wasn't it Steven Crowder who also screwed over somebody he used to work with? Was it not Gay Jared? Because he had him tied up in a contract. Wasn't that Steven Crowder who did that? So is he supposed to be the moral high bar? Or are we not supposed to call him out for that? Here's the
spilling the tea, Crystal. Mm-hmm. So in other words, you want to talk about exploitative contracts? You made your ex co-host or whatever sign an NDA.
I just love that these people are pretending to care about any of this.
I know, yeah, I know.
It's really wonderful.
And by the way, allow me to say, this is not Gay Jared guy. If there's one thing I know about him now, after hearing his name, he's gay. That's not even a joke. If you call yourself not Gay Jared, you're gay. It's like, I don't like sucking dicks, Bob. It's like, Bob, you probably suck a lot of dicks, bro.
Listen, Bob, no judgment. It's fine. Just, be comfortable.
Yeah, just don't call yourself no sucking dicks, Bob.
Steven, why don't you release Not Gay Jared from his NDA and allow him to talk about how he felt he was treated by you? Because I know that at The Blaze, everyone says that you're actually not that nice. You treat people poorly, but you bring in so much revenue that everybody just has to take it. So I don't like it. It stinks to high heaven, and I'm calling you out on that because I think it was crappy that you threw mud on me. Did it the first time via a tweet a long time ago. You're not doing it a second time. Total bitch move. Next.
Next. By the way, this is great because she brought up that tweet you did about me a long time ago. These people are keeping a log in their head, Crystal.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I really was under the misimpression that the right has this sort of default solidarity and the left are the only people who are petty and catty and logging all the minor disagreements and then waiting to explode and blow up on you and go through all them. And what this shows me is no, of course not. These people are just as human, they're just as petty, and they're just waiting for the opportunity to be I'm going to unleash now. So Kat is that tweet you said about me 3.5 years ago, bro, I'm going to get you back for that bitch move.
I'm not going to let you get away with this again.
Right,
I wonder what not drag queen George Santos has to say about this.
Well played. All right, so now we get to the big dog, Ben Shapiro. He responds, and let's see what he has to say. I think he was more measured than Candace, personally.
Yeah, he's more diplomatic.
Yeah, let's see.
Okay, meanwhile, I would just like to take a moment, speaking of big tech and its suppression of free speech, take one moment to comment on a controversy that has broken out because my friend Steven Crowder, been friends with Steven for a long time, well over a decade. I was his lawyer when he first signed a contract with Fox, and I've been friendly for a very long time. He put out a video essentially accusing Daily Wire of being in league with big tech. He's accusing us of being in league with big tech because of a term sheet, a negotiable term sheet that we submitted to him that offered to pay him $50 million over 4 years. And included provisions that said that if he got booted from arenas that would lose him ad dollars, since we would also lose the ad dollars, then he would lose money as well. This is typically how...
So again, that's a really good point. He's saying, look, if you're getting kicked off of YouTube and YouTube brings in X amount of revenue for you, then we also lose X amount of revenue. So we will guarantee you a certain amount of money, but that amount of money will be reduced a little bit if you lose a giant revenue source.
Yeah, whereas if you're independent and you lose 50% of your revenue, you just lose 50% of your revenue.
Correct. You don't lose only 25% of your fee. Which, by the way, do the math on that. If you got $50 million and they take 25% off of that, you still got a shitload of millions of dollars left, right?
Yes, correct.
Contracts work. If his show were to start losing money, this is true of my show. If my show loses money and it loses the Daily Wire money, I lose money. And so if Stephen had come to work at Daily Wire Plus, it would have been precisely the same thing. Right? That if he had lost money in the ad space and his show had lost money, then he also would have lost money because that's how a joint venture works. Stephen interpreted that as somehow misinterpreted. I'll give it the best possible gloss. He somehow misinterpreted that as us attempting to, quote unquote, do the work of YouTube. No. If you want more on that, then you should check out my friend and co-founder, Jeremy Boring's 55-minute video going through every single word of the term sheet that Stephen selectively read on his own YouTube channel. He read certain parts, he didn't read other parts. Jeremy reads literally word for word the entire term sheet and explains every single term therein. I think it is well worth the watch. We should all be on the same side of this thing. I'm encouraging you that you should go subscribe to Stephen's Mug Club. I hope that he's very successful in whatever endeavor he chooses to pursue. That does not mean that he happens to be correct about the term sheet we submitted to him, and there is something rather nasty about attacking people who have been friends for over a decade, colleagues, defenders for over a decade, on the basis of your own misinterpretation of a document that offers you $50 million over the course of 4 years.
So very diplomatic, fair commentary.
Yeah.
So now we get to all those reactions happen, and Steven Crowder comes out and does a second video. This was the final nail in the coffin that, of course, this was a setup.
Yeah.
So let's watch.
I'm asking, would you walk away? What would it take for you to walk away from $50 million? Because it's true.
Okay, all right. See, now, Crystal, now's the time for the devastating point, right? On the one hand, he says, oh my God, the contract is exploitative. It's so bad. How can this stand? And then in the next breath, he's like, I'm so brave for walking away from this amazing contract. I'm so principled. Which is it?
Right.
You need to pick one or the other.
Right.
You can't have both.
Yeah, well, he kind of flipped too from like, this was unfair to me in this like contract was so exploitative to me to like, I'm fine. I'm just looking out for the like future creators and I took a stand for them and walked away from this amazing $50 million contract on behalf of the movement and to save the country.
Yeah, exactly. So Stephen, there's a contradiction there, you dippy. Like you have to pick one of those two arguments. God, people like this drive me crazy. They just throw logic out the window because he's doing this like coordinated hit job, you know?
Exactly what I did. It's exactly what I'm doing. And so long as these contracts out there include enforcement of big tech, of punishing conservative creators on behalf of the people we claim to fight and the people who have long since demonetized us and can't stand me, and part of me doesn't blame them. As long as these contracts include that, not even for me, but the next person, I wouldn't take $1 billion. And certainly not if you understand in context, when behind closed doors, I know, and these people know, and acknowledge exactly what's being done to the next generation of creators.
Bench talent, young talent, they don't get deals like this.
So they don't get deals that...
They can be wage slaves for a little bit, come over and make a salary and grow their brand.
That you then own.
Oh, I own parts of it. I don't own it. They can, when their contract's up, they can still go out and they'll still be famous. They can keep doing their shows, so go do a show somewhere else. They'll be in a far, far, far better place. You helped make them.
No, not long as this contract. This contract owns it in perpetuity even after the contract. You're paying a lease but getting ownership. That's what this contract is.
On the content that we paid to produce, yes.
Okay, so of course the part that he's hyping up is they'll be wage slaves for a little bit.
Yeah.
To which I say, well, Steven Crowder, welcome to leftism. If you hear, this is like a run-of-the-mill, right? We're talking about a contract here between an employer and an employee. And he reads it, standard contract. And he's like, well, this is wage slavery. And the guy who's offering the contract is like, yeah, you got to be a wage slave for a little bit. And it's like, if you have an issue with this, you are not a capitalist.
Right.
Because this is capitalism 101. Yes, this is a point. Literally, the Republican Party in the 1800s argued that wage slavery is just as bad as chattel slavery. They thought you need to be able to work on your own and do your own thing. Because if you're working for somebody else, renting your labor on the marketplace, that is a form of slavery. That is wage slavery. That is just as bad as chattel slavery. That was the official position of the Republican Party in the 1800s. And then now, of course, they take the opposite perspective. Everything about capitalism is awesome. There's no, misalignment of power. There's no, hey, one party negotiating has a lot of power, the other one has no powers. This is kind of like, coercive by its very nature. But now, in this one particular instance, all of a sudden he's like, hey, man, this is bad. It's okay. Thanks, man. Yeah, we know capitalism sucks. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I think Steven Crowder should form a collective and seize the means of media production here.
Right. Imagine. So that's the thing. He pretends like, oh, I'm going to launch this media company and the contracts are not going to be exploitative. First of all, I don't believe that. If he actually has an NDA with the guy who used to work for him, clearly he believes in exploitative practices. Second of all, oh, you really want to set up an ethical business model? Okay, start your, conservative media co-op with people who come in, right?
Yeah.
You give everybody an equal stake in the business? Is that what you're going to do?
He can consult with Professor Richard Wolff on how to institute democracy at work, make sure they have labor union at least, ownership stake at best. I'm sure that's what he's got planned here.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I'll leave you with this one because this is just the most funny part to me. Ready? So it's from Noah Bloom. He says, in his video, Steven Crowder insists that this is a slave contract. There's no need to be enslaved like this. Then the Daily Wire released this slave contract was for $50 million over 4 years, 4 weeks off a year, and Crowder never working Fridays. Not a bad deal. And then you ready for this? This is the best. Tweet from Steven Crowder, or video from Steven Crowder. Delusional Colin Kaepernick compares slavery to $1 million contracts. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful. So
Yeah.
Steven Crowder's just posturing. That's all it is. Virtue signaling, trying to compete with Daily Wire.
I do think there might be a bigger, Republican looming primary split in here as well.
Of course, yeah.
Which is, the Daily Wire people, Shapiro in particular, lining up with DeSantis.
Right.
Crowder may be sort of posturing as the Trump wing,
Yeah, well, he's kind of hedged his bets, but yeah, I tend to agree that he needs to differentiate himself more from the Daily Wire people if he's going to compete with them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he's probably more, Ben Shapiro, for all of his flaws, is, pro-vaccine,
Yes.
So Crowder's going to lean into the anti-vax stuff. He's going to lean into the Ben Shapiro, for all of his flaws, he's not a huge election denier. Steven Crowder's going to lean into the election denial stuff.
Yes.
Ben Shapiro is the slightly higher IQ version of conservatism. And Steven's going to lean into I'm the dumbass version, and my version is more popular.
Well, and it does make sense, zooming out from these particular personalities and these particular dynamics, it does make sense that you would see this splintering and fracturing now because they are headed into a competitive primary where people are going to pick sides. Whereas, for a while, you've had everybody kind of united behind Trump. So there is a kind of logic to now would be the time when you start to see conservative media fracturing.
That's right. And it's going to get really, really ugly. It's already ugly. It's going to get way uglier. Because I learned this. Remember when I was trying to mediate between TYT and Jimmy Dore when they were tearing each other down? And I'm like, hey, guys, could we just all get along and stuff, guys? There's just... No, at certain points in time, you come to an inevitable split and disagreement where there is no, there is no mediating it. There is no trying to soften the blow. There is no, hey, let's be reasonable and try to see each other's points of view. It's just no, this is a natural point of deflection. This is a natural point of we're just going our separate ways. You know what I mean?
And clearly Crowder sees a market opening, knows that he can profit most by facilitating this hard split. And, picking up his side of the ledger, and he's willing to throw whatever, friends, relationship, business associations, et cetera, that he's had over the past decade, he's willing to that's not important to him.
Yeah. But it's funny to me how many people are falling for his, faux principled posturing here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really funny. It's really funny to me.
We were looking in the comment section. Candace went on with Tim Pool to talk about this stuff, and we weren't going to sit through the 2.5-hour video or whatever of it, but we did dig into the comment section, and most of them were on Crowder's
Steven, we're 100%
side.
with you, bro.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
what a hero you are.
It's a bad look for Candace, et cetera, et cetera.
It's funny. Anyway, let them fight.